Today we're going to start off with one of the most fundamental aspects of bike riding. That's the bike. Okay. Bikes these days are so incredibly good that even when they are set up a bit wrong or even not quite fit for the task, they still wipe the floor with anything from over a decade ago, mostly due to modern geometry. There are so many variables involved when it comes to tuning a bike to fit a rider and their use case that you are never going to get it perfect. This is such an expansive topic and I couldn't bring myself to miss anything out, so this video will be split into chapters so you can skip to whatever section is relevant to you. Or you could settle in with a brew and learn a few things. Hopefully by the end you'll know exactly what parts to choose and changes to make to your bike to get closer to your version of perfection. Or maybe you already have the perfect bike setup. If so, how? How did you do it? What's the secret? It doesn't matter. We'll come to you. We're coming. Guys, pack up. We're coming. Let's start at the heart of the bike and talk about frames. There's a lot to be tackled here, so I'm going to simplify most of the outcomes into two camps: increasing stability and decreasing stability. Increasing stability makes a bike calmer, predictable, and easier to ride through challenging terrain as it's not moving as much underneath you. This suits people that want a safe, comfortable ride or want to maximize speed and consistency. Decreasing stability makes a bike more playful, exciting, and easier to maneuver, which allows you to be more creative and playful as you ride. This suits riders who want to have a wilder ride and get a real buzz while trying to get the most out of the trail. Right, frame size is something that has changed a lot over the years. Frames used to be sized by their seat tube length, and it was a carryover from road bikes. Mountain bikers have moved away from focusing on that method of sizing as it doesn't really have a big impact in how a bike descends. The easiest measurement to define this is the reach, which is the horizontal measurement from the center of the top of the head tube back to the intersection of a vertical line from the center of the bottom bracket. This measurement connects your two main contact points of your pedals and your handlebars to give you the best idea of how a bike fits when you're up out of the saddle and riding. This reach measurement is twinned with stack height. Stack is not as important as reach, as you can influence stack height easily with stem spacers, bar heights, and stem rise to tune it for each rider. The common theme of late is to go longer and longer in reach measurements, which was driven by racers and designers searching for more bike stability. For example, my 2014 Santa Cruz Tallboy, which was a double XL size, had a reach of 458mm compared to my 2020 Tallboy, rocking an extra 57mm of reach at 515mm. That means the old extra large size Tallboy would feel about the same as a medium version of my current bike. Wild. Now, if you listen to modern geo fanatics who've been sipping on the marketing Kool-Aid these past few years, my old bike should be absolutely unrideable. Terrible. Piece of complete and utter garbage. Well, actually, it wasn't. It was sick. I really enjoyed riding it and I won quite a few enduro races on it. This is because frame size, when it's defined by reach, doesn't actually have to be strictly tied to the rider's height. The simple explanation is this: the longer the bike, the more stable it is, and the more stable the rider will be within it due to their contact points being further apart. A wider pyramid is, the base of the wider pyramid, more stable. Narrow pyramid, not stable. Yeah, makes sense. Some bikes allow you to fit headsets that can either extend the reach or shorten it, or change the head angle. Head angles vary greatly between mountain bikes and can usually be found between 70 degrees at the steep end all the way through to 60 degrees at the slack end. Slacker head angles make the bike more stable by slowing down the steering and increasing the wheelbase, which is advantageous for going fast and feeling safe. The opposite is true for steepening the head angle. It makes the bike more nimble and twitchy. Reach extenders are, as the name suggests, used to extend the reach of a frame by a small amount, or when turned around can reduce the reach. Longer reach for more stability, shorter to make things more maneuverable. Take my downhill bike for example, Santa Cruz V10 with a 7mm reach extender, which makes things a bit calmer when munching through the roughest of tracks on the planet. At the other end of the bicycle, some brands give you the option to adjust the chainstay length. The main things a rider will feel from this change is that a shorter back end makes it easier to lift the front wheel for manuals, wheelies, and popping off flatter takeoffs. So if short chainstays are better for manuals, then why the hell would you want a long chainstay? Weight distribution. When cornering, the tyres need to be evenly weighted to grip equally. With a short chainstay, the rider will have to ride further forward in the bike to evenly weight those tyres compared to a longer chainstay. It might only seem like a small difference, but a longer chainstay can really help a rider weight the front end. Final tweak you'll find in some frames is BB height adjustments, and that's the bottom bracket height. Lowering the BB height will also reduce reach and slacken head angle by a small amount and vice versa, so be aware of that. So low bottom brackets are the way forward. Well, not always. You've got to pedal these things to get them up the hills, and low bottom brackets equal more pedal strikes, which are never fun. You also run the risk of catching your chainring on obstacles, so it has to be a balance which will depend on the terrain you ride and how good your technique is. General rule in my eyes is to go as low as you can without affecting pedaling and clearance. Talking of that, let's move on to some components. Crank length is something that used to be based upon body shape and size combined with pedaling dynamics to find an optimum crank length for maximum efficiency and power transfer. That is still relevant, but for a lot of mountain bikers, it's not as important as the clearance issue I mentioned before. For aggressive riding, short cranks are the business. I've always used 165mm as they are the shortest cranks readily available, but I would go shorter given the chance. Some viewers will definitely be scoffing saying, well, shorter cranks have less leverage, so you'll be losing out on power. Wrong! Max power output on a shorter crank does come at higher cadence, but it's well within what's manageable. Shorter cranks are effectively like being in a harder gear. Just change gear and you'll put in the same effort for the same speed and not clap your pedals off every stone and stump. Oh, also, recently shorter cranks are being made and are becoming more popular. Do you know why? That's right. E-bikers. These freeloaders are cutting about the countryside, haphazardly mashing their battery-assisted pedals off everything in sight. When these wealthy slackers start complaining about something, enterprising companies will always jump at the opportunity to sell them something for many, many monies. Thanks, e-bikers. Yay! Moving on from cranks, we just scooch over a little bit to the pedals, and that's where we get into the great clips versus flats debate. Here it is in simple terms. Flats are easy. With modern sticky rubber shoes, they have plenty of grip and you don't have to learn how to use them. You can twist without worrying about your feet clipping out, put your foot down easily if you make a mistake or without stressing about getting clipped back in, and they also help to promote good technique. But when it gets rougher, your feet will eventually bounce and move into a bad position, which at best makes you ride poorly and at worst can make you crash. Clips have a steeper learning curve and they take longer to master, but they have two massive benefits. You don't have to worry about your feet bouncing on the pedals and you have more control over moving the bike around as your feet are locked in. Yes, they can cause you to develop bad habits and that's why you should switch back and forward between them. I'm of the opinion that clips are something more suited to racing where every performance advantage should be utilised and flats are for everything else. That is my opinion, and ultimately, like so many things here, it comes down to personal preference. Flats are cooler though, way cooler. Suspension setup doesn't just need its own video, it needs a whole series of them. I remember the general rules for suspension that I read in my favourite mountain biking magazine 20 years ago when I was a slightly smaller boy, was set your spring rate so that you bottom out your suspension at least a couple times every run. Set compression for comfort and rebound so that you get one oscillation when riding off a curb. Yep. You get to the bottom of a flow trail and be like, I didn't bottom out there. Guess I'll go down a spring rate. Next ride on something with heavy hits, you'll be slapping into the bottom out stops on every feature. I find it's always best to start with manufacturer's recommended settings for suspension as they're usually pretty good. Next, you should never bottom out your suspension unless you've either done something wrong, like badly casing a jump, or hitting something proper gnarly like a big drop to flat. If you are bottoming out and your sag is correct, then you need to preferably add volume spacers to your positive air chamber if you have an air shock. If you have a coil, go up a spring rate. Compression is then used to find a blend of chassis stability versus comfort. If the bike is wallowing around feeling sluggish and moving more than you would like, add compression. If the bike is feeling too harsh, then remove compression. Rebound is a personal preference to a certain degree, but I prefer to have the front slightly faster in rebound than the rear. I find the opposite to make me feel like I'm being pushed forward too much out of compressions. Using these rules and some experimentation, you can get things feeling really good. The key thing is to do back-to-back runs of the same track and make small changes. Otherwise, it's just placebo. Couple other things, fork offset, shorter in theory, should be more stable, and coil versus air. That old chestnut, coil for consistency and suppleness, and air for tunability and poppiness. That is it. That is it. Max on Instagram, on his phone.
I'm not on Instagram, I'm on the script.
Oh, are you?
Writing a short list.
Whoa! He's actually... Wow!
Right, can we keep going, please?
Wow!
Thank you.
Here's a hot topic for Pinkbike, bar width. Guessing a lot of you watched the series Full Enduro with Zoe Dawson from a couple of years back. I won't spoil it for you, but apparently her bars were maybe the wrong width. Maybe, who knows. So on bar width, there's many ways to calculate it, and some people have tried to come up with formulas to simplify it. But in a game with so many variables, no one really knows what's best. According to one formula I tried, I need 870mm wide bars. Yeah? Yeah, nah. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of narrow bars? 1. Narrow bars fit through tighter gaps. 2. Smaller arm inputs equals more turning of the wheel for faster steering. And 3. You look retro AF. But on the other hand, 1. A narrower bar and therefore narrower grip means less lateral stability. And 2. Do you actually want or need faster steering? What about wider bars? Well, 1, steering is more precise as it takes a bigger range of more controllable movement for the same degree of wheel turn. 2, more lateral stability. 3, more leverage to combat compressions and obstacles that try to tug and turn the wheel in unfavorable directions. And 4, you look moto AF. And on the negative side, 1, with wider bars, your vertical range of motion is reduced the wider you move from shoulder width. 2, you'll punch a lot of trees. 3, Pinkbike commenters will rip you a new one if they think they're too wide. There is no correct width, so it's something you need to experiment with. First of all, you have to choose a width that suits your trails. No point in running wider bars if you're going to get wedged between some trees. I find the bar width to correlate well with the stability chat from earlier, so I go with 810mm wide on my downhill race bike, super stable, 800 on my enduro and e-bike, 780mm on my trail bike, and 760mm on my hardtail. In essence, you can use bar width to tune how playful or stable the bike is, to a certain degree anyway. I mentioned reach and stack measurements for frames earlier and how they relate to a rider's stability on the bike. Well, you don't actually hold on to the top of the top tube when you ride. You actually hold on to the bars, which can be adjusted in several ways. The general rule is that the bar height should grow with rider height, but the type of riding you focus on takes priority. What this means is if you only get lifts to the top and ride down super steep downhill tracks, you should run higher bars. And if you're an XC hero looking for maximum efficiency on the climbs, you need to install a riser stem upside down, and you flip your bars upside down as well, so you can get right forward and lick your front tire. The reason for taller riders needing higher bars is because when in an efficient riding position, their center of gravity is higher. To be able to stabilize this higher mass, you need a higher contact point so the rider can more efficiently control those fore to aft forces. Imagine riding a steep descent on a tiny little kid's bike with low bars. With the bars that low down, where you have nothing to push against to support your upper body, you'll quickly just go over the bars as soon as you hit something. For smaller riders, having the bars too high will limit their ability to get their weight low and forward during certain techniques, so they need them to be lower. The reason to tune bar height for terrain is to get maximum performance when the bike is at a certain pitch. For XC, you want maximum performance and comfort when the bike is pitched up for the climbs. You need your bars to be lower so you can easily get your weight forward without straining your upper body. For downhill, you want maximum performance and comfort when the bike is pitched down riding steep trails. Raising the bars allows you to move back a little further when it's required and also provides a higher contact point to push against when you're braking hard at severe downward angles. It's up to you to figure out what you need and, like everything in this vid, experiment and see what works. If you look from the side, as long as you mount the bars so that the upsweep is vertical, you can increase or decrease your stack height without affecting the reach. If you use the stem spacers method or stem risers, you introduce more flex to the front end and also the bars will move along the axis of the bike's head angle, which will shorten reach as the bars go up and lengthen reach as the bars go down. Stem length is a personal preference thing, but longer stems generally produce worse handling due to the window wiper style of steering that messes with weight distribution compared to the more direct input with a shorter stem. I personally run high front ends and I accomplish this with a bar height rather than stem spacers to maintain my reach. I run 38mm rise Deity bars on most of my bikes because I want max comfort when descending most of the time. But I do run some lower 20mm rise bars on my trail bike for more balance between climbing and descending comfort. Brakes have quite a few variables, so let's try and simplify those choices. Braking power is something you can tweak with a couple variables: rotor size and pad compound. There will be some out there saying, yeah, and 4 piston brakes are more powerful than 2 pistons, you idiot. Well, not always. Piston count isn't the important factor, it's piston surface area. When you pull that brake lever, the force is passed into the braking fluid, runs down the brake line into the caliper, which is then multiplied by the surface area of the pistons. That means you can get more power from larger 2-piston brakes than from smaller 4-piston ones. More often than not though, 4-piston brakes will give you a 10 to 20% boost in power. I just wanted to be pedantic. 4-piston brakes will also give you more modulation. The more modulation, the easier it is to control how hard you brake, but it also means peak power often comes at a higher force input. That means brakes with better modulation often need to be pulled harder to slow you down as much, which might be bad news if you suffer from arm pump. Thermal control is super important if you ride longer descents, as overheating brakes will cause the pads to glaze over and braking power to fade. 4-piston brakes have a larger thermal mass and surface area, which helps manage that heat. If you combine that with larger, heavier and thicker rotors, 4-piston brakes are more consistent over longer descents. They will have different friction properties, but the general rule is organic pads are more powerful at lower temperatures but will overheat, glaze over, lose power and wear out faster compared to sintered. Sinter pads are less powerful at cooler temperatures but are more resistant to overheating, maintain power at higher temperatures, have more power in the wet and last longer. That all means if you're a lighter, less aggressive, mellow trail rider, organic pads would suit you as they have better power at those lower operating temperatures. I am a large, aggressive rider, so I run sintered pads and larger rotors to get maximum power at the higher operating temperatures. I mentioned rotor size can be used to increase or decrease power, with larger ones increasing leverage the brake can insert on the wheel, increasing power. Larger rotors also increase the thermal mass, helping to resist overheating. So the choice is between weight or power and consistency. I know that I prefer power. Finally, with brakes, you have the lever setup. Again, there is no solid rule. Some run their levers almost flat, as Johan Burley. Some have them pointed right down, Danny McCaskill. It's up to you to experiment and see what suits your riding style and body type. The things to watch out for are feeling like your hands are going to roll forwards when it gets rough, which means your levers might be down too much. The other thing to look out for is if they're too high, it can actually feel like it limits how much you can get your weight forward in certain maneuvers. So it's up to you to experiment to see what works. I find a lot of people tend to run them too far down.
Can't even see the brake lever.
I'd recommend experimenting with putting them up a bit. Bite point does have a rule though. The closer you can have the bite point to the bars, the harder you can pull them. This is because your fingers can exert more force the lower down the finger you have the brake lever. Try hanging on a pull-up bar with just the tips of your fingers compared to the middle of the fingers. To do this, you have to slide the lever along the bar until your finger is right at the end of that brake lever, so you don't squish your middle finger when you pull that brake. You want to leave some wiggle room so that the lever isn't hitting the grip. Although Joe Barnes has his touch in, but He's a strange boy. Staying up at the controls, let's take a quick look at grips. The three important things are pattern, compound, and thickness. If you ride in wet and muddy conditions, you need a good deep pattern in the grip, like this Deity Lockjaw that I've been running, because it's always wet here. 2. Compound is a personal preference, but the softer and stickier, the more vibration damping you get, which is nice. The downsides of softer grips is they wear out faster and they can actually make it harder to control your bike, as every input you put in through your hands, whether it's pushing or pulling, gets absorbed a little through the grips. I've found big fat foamy grips, which I did like, to be really detrimental to bike control, so it has to be a compromise. Thickness depends on hand size and personal preference. Big fat grips for big hands and skinny grips for smaller hands. Final little bit at the handlebar controls is gear and dropper levers. If you have adjustments for these, try to set them up so that you have to do the minimum amount of thumb unwrap from the bars to hit the levers. The more you have to unwrap the thumb, the less securely you're attached to the bike, which could cause a disaster if you hit a bump at the wrong time. Bah! Blow the hand off. Death. Death. Wheel size has been all over the joint this past decade. People get so flippin' passionate about it, and the phrase, pick a wheel size and be a about it. It really holds true. When 29-inch wheels first started appearing, nearly everyone hated on wagon wheels. They look crap, they're too flexy, they can't turn, I hate them. Then, someone does some testing and finds out they can be faster. Some races are won and suddenly it's all, you need a 29er, 26 is poverty. If you're not running a 9er, you ain't beating the timer. That works. One of the common things thrown around when it comes to larger wheels is the increase in grip thanks to the larger contact patch between the tyre and the ground. This would be 100% true if we were riding on roads and grip was based on how much rubber you can put on tarmac. In mountain biking, a lot of the time, you are riding on unstable dirt and rock, and the grip your tyre generates comes from its ability to bite into this surface to find traction. The bigger the contact patch, the more spread out the force is, and the less the tyre can actually bite into the ground. It's one of the reasons professional racers don't use the widest tyres available. Also, most riders are not taking tyres to the limits of grip. I would happily put money on average Joe not being able to tell the difference, even if they do say, night and day difference, man. I'm on rails. That's placebo. So here's what you will actually feel with wheel size differences. Bigger wheels are more stable and smaller wheels are more playful. Bigger wheels smooth out rough sections and smaller wheels make tamer trails more exciting. Bigger wheels hold speed better and smaller wheels can slow down quicker. These are the key differences, and you can see a striking similarity between reach and wheel size, with larger being more stable and therefore more suited to going fast, and smaller being more lively and maneuverable and therefore better for playing and having fun. It's up to you to choose what fits your riding goals, as no wheel size is better for everything, despite what the marketers might say. For this reason, I choose full 29 on my race bikes, and I'm switching things over to 27.5 for my fun bikes. But there is another thing that dictates wheel size. Some riders will struggle to ride 29-inch rear wheels due to limiting how far back they can move on the bike. This is what has driven the move of many racers to 29-inch front and 27.5-inch mixed wheel bikes, which have the stability of 29-inch on the front and the playfulness of 27.5-inch on the rear. It's not for me though. Not for me. I'm a big boy. So hopefully you know what wheel size will suit your riding, but what about the tyres? I find the recommended use cases for each tyre model are pretty accurate, so I'm not going to tell you what tyres you should use and when, but tyre pressures, well, that I can help you with. So tyre pressures will depend on many variables like tyre casing, rider weight, riding style, the trails that you ride, but there are some general rules. For more aggressive riders, you'll want to run your pressures as low as you can without getting tyre squirm when really driving the bike into firm corners. What's tyre squirm? Well, have you ever seen vids with people shralping turns, spraying tyre sealant and generally making noises that sound extremely unhealthy? Cue the clips of Phil. That's tyre squirm, and it's a sign of your tyre pressure being too low and can actually cause you to lose traction and control, unless you're Phil. For less aggressive riders, you want to run the tyres as soft as you can without dinging the rims, which is when you feel the tyres bottoming out on sharp objects on the trail. Usually you hear ding, I ding my rim, ding, ding. Sweet. I'd recommend starting at higher PSI pressures and working your way down rather than the opposite, which would detonate your wheels. Top end of pressure I'd recommend is about 35 PSI for normal mountain biking, and that's only for the super heavy, aggressive, poor technique bulldozers. The bottom end of pressure can go all the way down to maybe about 15 PSI for super light, small, little people. It's also good to run the front tyre between 10 to 20% softer, depending on riding style and preference, as it endures less force compared to the back wheel. Don't fall for the misconception that softer tyres will equal more grip. It's true when lowering from a super high pressure, but you'll get to a point that the tyre will just start squirming, causing instability, and the tyre will actually struggle to bite into the ground if it's too soft. I'm running some tubeless Continental 2.4 inch tyres, as I feel that width has the best blend of cushion, stability and bite. I wish I could tell you more about them, as they're actually like really sick, but I'm not allowed. Can't tell you. Sorry. I run 30 PSI in the back and 25 PSI in the front, and I find that to be a perfect blend of stability, comfort and grip for my riding style. That is everything that I feel really makes a difference to bike setup. And if you sat through the whole thing, then bravo. You've done your pat in the back. Guys, come on, round of applause here. Just, appreciate you. Hopefully you learned something today, and if you did, I'd appreciate what I hope is a well-earned thumbs up. I know the crew earned it for having to sit through all of that. If you've got any questions, I'm going to be hanging around in the comments for about an hour after this goes live to try and answer them all, but now it is all up to you. Take what you've learned from today, make some well-informed tweaks to your bike, get it working better, maximize that performance, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video. It's everything you need to know about body positioning, and we're actually going to ride bikes, so you don't want to miss it. Bikes, we're going to ride bikes.